Thank you folks for joining. Good afternoon. My name is Kiran Rao. I'm the Director of Product Management. I'm responsible for all the remote experience. Something's weird. I'm responsible for all the remote experience features in VMware. That includes Blast Protocol. That includes all the Horizon clients, 3D graphics. That's me. Sean?
Sean Samenfeld-Specht, Senior Manager R&D. I'm responsible for the Blast Display Protocol from the development side. So,
thank you, Sean. How many of you, this is a repeat session, so thank you for joining us. I think many of you might have been surprised by seeing this in the last minute. Did any of you attend the session in the morning? Thank you. I was really worried if somebody appeared from the morning session, that means we were not clear on what we said and the person wants to hear it again. So that's not the case. So thank you very much. Welcome. What we'll do as part of this is we'll talk to you about Blast Extreme Protocol and what we have done in the last 6 months. How many of you are familiar with Blast Extreme Protocol? Just show of hands. Good. How many of you have actually tried Blast Extreme Protocol? Cool. Wonderful. How many of you are PCOR-IP customers and continue to use PCOR-IP on a regular basis? All right. And how many of you actually use the Teradici Zero clients? You do have some. Okay. We're going to address some of those things, right? Some of you may have concerns about we are introducing Blast Extreme. What does that mean for PCOR-IP? We'll talk about it a little bit in this session. But the core focus as part of this session is going to be around Blast Extreme Protocol. And we are going to be available for like 10-15 minutes because we have another session at 3:30. But we'll try to be available for about 15 minutes after the session to answer any questions or concern you may have. And we'll also spend about 10 minutes towards the end of the session with any Q&A. Okay? Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to go straight into these slides. So we basically introduced Blast Extreme about 3 years ago. We called this as the Blast Protocol at that time. When we did the Horizon 7 launch, what we did was we put together a new marketing name for Blast, and the reason being that we made that as the mainstream Tier 1 protocol and as the default protocol. So our marketing team wanted to bring in a new name that would catch people's attention, so we actually called it a Blast Extreme Protocol. Back in 2013, what we did was our customers had asked for an easier way to access desktops and applications just using an HTML browser. So we looked at all the available options, whether to use PCOR-IP or whether to bring in something new. One of the fundamental requirements of looking at HTML access is if you want a good user experience, you got to be using standards-based hardware. That was the primary goal. So in order to be able to use standards-based hardware and deliver a good user experience, we actually started off Blast Protocol as something to deliver a remote experience over HTML access. In 2015, we wanted to introduce Linux VDI support. There's a big number of customers of us who use Linux VDI. Some of them in the developer community, some of them in the 3D graphics community. So we enhanced Blast to support Linux VDI. And as of 2016, when we announced Horizon 7, we made Blast fully feature parity with PCOR-IP and more because we support HTML access and Linux VDI. And we also made that as the default protocol. So today, Blast Extreme supports HTML access, Linux VDI, Windows VDI, and published RDSH applications. Everything that you get from Horizon 7 is supported through Blast Extreme Protocol. So the primary goal for us with Blast Extreme is to deliver a rich user experience over standards-based hardware. Whether it comes to a Windows VM or a Linux VM, it doesn't matter which type of backend you have, whether you have a software backend or a hardware backend. We wanted to make sure that we deliver an exceptional user experience, particularly given that users are no longer confined to a LAN environment, but they're also spreading around, and we have more and more mobile users or WAN users coming into play. So rich user experience was one of the primary aspects, and that's one of the reasons also why we wanted to go with a standards-based protocol, and we chose H.264 to deliver that Blast experience. So primarily, Blast has 6 pillars, right? The first pillar is that we want to deliver a good experience on standards-based hardware. As I said, we leverage upon H.264 codec format to be able to deliver that experience. Think about Netflix, Hulu, these kind of streaming applications. They all rely on H.264 technology today. And every one of the devices that ships, whether it's a mobile device, laptop, tablet, phone, desktop, they all have H.264 decoders available on the platform. So it made a lot of sense for us to leverage this and deliver the right user experience, because you don't want to be taxing the CPU every time, and you want to be leveraging something that's offloading from the CPU and delivering that exceptional user experience. The second one was actually the Nvidia grid technology, right? Or in general, the 3D graphics workloads. So we have a large number of users who have now started to look at and are deploying Horizon 7 for managing virtual workstations. Previously, VDI used to be, and I've been in the VDI industry for about 7 to 8 years now. It used to be mostly focused around task workers and knowledge workers to a large extent. Now we are starting to see the rich workloads where even the high-end 3D graphics, AutoCAD, CATIA, these kind of applications, IT administrators want to virtualize these physical workstations and move them into the data center, but give the end users the flexibility that they can access their desktops from anywhere in the world. And especially when they are at customer sites, they don't have to carry around the heavy machines with them anymore. It's much simpler for them to access the virtual workstations running in the cloud and be able to finish their work. We also wanted a protocol which adapts to different types of networks. So with PC or IP, we primarily supported UDP protocol. One of the drawbacks of UDP protocol, and if many of you have tried to access Netflix or any of these streaming media websites when you're in a hotel, what you'll see is that they actually block it. And the reason is they want you to actually pay for pay-per-view, and they don't want you to use Netflix within the hotels. What that also meant was that your connection to your backend to be able to deliver your desktops and apps was completely blocked because we use UDP protocol. So with Blast, we also introduced support for TCP, and in fact, TCP is the default. TCP is not blocked generally anywhere. If it is blocked, it means you don't have an internet connection. So TCP is not blocked, and users are able to get to their desktops and applications through TCP. Now, if administrator on the backend allows UDP, they can switch between TCP and UDP, but most of the time, end users don't want to do all those things. The default protocol configured out of the box works for them. Blast Extreme is also built for the cloud. We are able to efficiently handle packet loss. We are only enhancing the overall experience in terms of how much packet loss we can handle. Today, most networks, you'll say about 2 to 3% packet loss, and Blast Extreme actually behaves very, very well for packet loss beyond that as well. And finally, battery life, right? If you're using many of you you're all at the conference today, and in case you have to access your desktops and you're doing some active work, you want to make sure that the protocol is not draining heavily on your battery. That's why having an offload engine and being able to leverage that and not consume too much on the CPU actually helps, because you're able to extend the life of your battery within your mobile devices. So, couple of things to remember, right? One is with Horizon 7, we introduced Blast Extreme, which is much more improved compared to the previous versions. PC or IP still continues to be supported. There is no change from that aspect. So for those of you who are using PC or IP, who are invested into PC or IP, you want to migrate to Horizon 7, it's absolutely supported. Blast Extreme brings in certain advantages, which you may want to consider evaluating and seeing if that's appropriate for your enterprise as you move forward with your evaluations, as you bring in more number of users, or you have different types of application and use cases that you want to support. But PC or IP continues to be supported as part of Horizon 7. Within Blast Extreme, we support 2 codecs essentially. One is an H.264, which is the default and which we envision most of the users to be using. But we also provide support for JPEG format. And the reason is, if any of you are in the healthcare space, if you want a doctor to be viewing an X-ray, they want 100% lossless video quality. H.264 by nature, or by the way the protocol is designed, is a lossy protocol. That's how it's designed. So in those cases where a customer wants a lossless protocol, it's just a checkbox where they can say default to JPEG protocol, and it's going to deliver that lossless image quality that healthcare market requires. So both of those things are supported. So by default, H.264, you can always fall back to JPEG PNG. So as I said, with Horizon 7, our primary goal was to make sure that we bring out an extremely good protocol which adapts well to different types of networks. But more importantly, we want to make sure that from a feature parity perspective, Blast Extreme was at feature parity compared to PC or IP, and actually did more. So when it comes to thinking about which protocol to select, you now have an easy task saying, one is if you want HTML access Linux VDI, it's a no-brainer, you're going to go for Blast protocol. If you need any of the other peripheral devices, you're thinking about, I have this smart card, will this smart card work with PCORIP and BLAST, or do I have to pick one versus the other? You don't have to worry about any of those things, right? From an overall feature perspective, it's on par when it comes to supporting any of the USB peripherals, real-time audio, video, multimedia redirection. These are all supported as part of both BLAST Extreme and PCORIP. The other aspect is the breadth of clients that we have, right? So today, as I said, you may have users who are using different types of devices, or you may have a situation where you have a BYOD kind of a scenario where your users are bringing in. So I work with a very large organization which has 300,000 plus, primarily driven around services, and they actually enforce a BYOD policy. So we really have to make sure that independent of the type of device, we support the rich client ecosystem, and we have clients that's available for each and every platform out there. So in the last 6 months, we launched Horizon 7 in March of this year. Our primary focus and the feedback that we got from customers, and we knew going out of the box that from an overall fine-tuning the protocol for different environments, whether it came to video quality or audio quality, we supported the highest level. And what that means is out of the box you had the best experience, but we did not provide too much parameters in there to fine-tune the protocol itself depending on different types of network conditions. There was a lot of things built in automatically where the protocol would do the right thing given the customer or the user's environment, but many times when you look at an environment, let's say you have 100 users within your organization and you have different types of users. You have task workers to specialty workers. Sometimes the work that one person is doing or the task worker is doing may have an impact on the high-end users or the workstation users. So for you to be able to enforce and say that for these task workers I want to be able to apply some policies where I restrict the amount of bandwidth that BLAST Extreme protocol is going to consume, whereas for a certain other type of users there's going to be absolutely no limitation. We did not build in those fine-tuning parameters. So what we've gone ahead and done that. So when we release our 4.2 version, which is going to come out next month, you will have support for all of those things. You will have those fine-tuning parameters where you can control, and as IT administrators you can say, I can now guarantee that a virtual workstation users will be guaranteed a certain type of user experience and not be limited by the activities of others within an organization. So you're able to apply that kind of profiles. So that fine-grained control in terms of being able to tune the protocol is what we are adding. We have also gone ahead and integrated into some of the management software that we ship, our partnership, we'll talk about that, but we completed that portfolio as well for BLAST Extreme protocol. And there's still a lot of work that we're doing, and we'll still continue to optimize for the worst case scenarios, but today BLAST Extreme is ready for 99.9% of the users. That 0.1% of the users I'm talking about are sitting on extremely low bandwidth with very high latencies, high packet loss. We will address their requirements as well, but that's not majority of the situation. So for majority of the users, BLAST Extreme protocol delivers what's expected from the end users and IT administrators. So we briefly talked about it. So broad client support, being able to deliver using low bandwidth with a good battery life, being able to offload media, things like flash redirection, multimedia redirection. These are all the things that are already supported with BLAST Extreme as well as with PCORIP. The other important part is to be able to move those physical workstations to the cloud. We have a section which specifically talks about the workstation users and what we support and our partners there. So I'll quickly skip over this, but we'll come back to this topic and have more discussions on what we support in this aspect. So we talked about this as well. The reason why some of these slides are there, even though I've talked about it, these are going to be handed off to you at a later stage where you'll be able to download it. So if you need to go back and refer to it, it's all available for you. So in terms of networking, one of the primary goals for us has been most of the enterprises have very strict rules in terms of the firewall ports and what needs to be opened, right? There are certain ports that are always going to be opened up irrespective of which organization it is, and that's TCP port 443. But for some of the other ports, there are people who manage the firewalls are very different from the people who actually manage the VDI desktops. So sometimes it becomes hard even for doing some evaluations to see how do we manage these, do we have to open up these firewall rules, do we have to change those policies, what does that mean from a security perspective. So one area where we have closely focused for BLAST Extreme is how do we reduce the number of firewall ports that's required. So today over port 443, you can actually deliver a complete VDI experience, but only if you want to open up things like USB peripheral redirection from an external network. That's when you need to consider enabling more firewall ports. Internally, it's not an issue because most of the ports are open and you can access it, but from an external perspective, for the basic desktop to be able to access your desktop applications, you don't have to worry about going and working with the guys who manage the firewalls to have them open up more number of ports. So most of it is going to work out of the box, including things like line drive redirection. They're all going to work on port 443. So bandwidth is another area where we've spent a lot of time. So we have added a lot of GPO parameters, and Sean is going to talk about some of them at a later stage. But we've added a lot of fine-tuning knobs where you can actually specify and say, here is the maximum bandwidth I want to allocate for these users. We've also added knobs where if you can set different audio quality levels. Previously, when we came out at a very with the best quality levels. But if you're on a low bandwidth network, let's say a 3G or a 4G type of connection, you may want to manage even audio because it does consume some of the bandwidth, right? So we have all those fine-grained controls built into it, and it'll all be integrated into our software management tools as we move forward. So a lot of companies have main offices, you have branch offices. Sometimes your VDI desktops are actually running in the main office, but you want to actually have your branch offices also be able to access those VDI desktops and be able to provide a good user experience. So there are software from third-party vendors, like one of them is Riverbed, with whom we have partnered, and we do support WAN optimization protocol with BlastExtreme. We could not do that previously with PCRIP because PCRIP was primarily a UDP-based protocol, but with BlastExtreme, because it supports TCP, we are now able to provide WAN optimization as well. We will be looking at additional partners, and depending on our customer requirements, we'll be adding more and more support around these areas. But to start with, we have gone ahead and integrated our products with Riverbed, and we do support WAN optimization with Riverbed. We have also integrated our software with our own tools. VMware has tools called vRealize Operations, which is basically monitoring tools. So we've integrated BlastExtreme with that. So if you're using this tool, you can actually see all the different performance counters for BlastExtreme as part of this tool. Similarly, we have smart policies with our user environment manager, where you can apply different types of policies, and BlastExtreme is also integrated with this. And this is the area where you can actually specify and say, what type of profiles do you want to have for these users, apply profiles based on their location, type of use case, their WAN bandwidth. There are different aspects that you can take into consideration when you're applying these smart policies, and it's important to make sure that the protocol is part of it, and we have gone ahead and integrated that as well into the user environment manager. Okay, so switching topics, and this is again part of overall delivering the best user experience. 3D graphics is a big vertical for us. As part of 3D graphics, we have worked very closely with all the 3D graphics vendors to deliver a great user experience. How many of you had a chance to go by VMware's booth today in the expo hall? I would strongly recommend, if you have not had a chance, I'm pretty sure today is the first day you guys are all busy with attending different sessions. You should go there and look at some of the demos that we have put together, right? Things that you wouldn't think were possible using VDI technology, we are able to demonstrate that today because of protocols like this and what we have done in terms of finally integrating our products with our partners' products. So the first one is with Nvidia. With Nvidia, we have a very, very wide range of support, and Nvidia has a big market share when it comes to 3D graphics. They're very, very popular. We've gone ahead and integrated and made sure that BlastExtreme works very well with all the different cards that they have, particularly around the Tesla M series. They have M6, M60, and the newest one is the M10 series. One of the biggest advantages, so for those of you who have been using PCRIP, you might have heard that PCRIP had an offload card. It was called as the Apex cards. The primary purpose of that card was not to tax the CPU on the servers, but be able to offload to a separate card and be able to do the encoding on the server side so that you're able to get better density from an overall server perspective. With BlastExtreme, because we work on standards and all these NVIDIA cards have H.264 encode engine built into them, you no longer have the need for a separate card, but you're also able to fully utilize what's already available in the card. So in addition to doing GPU offloading or graphics offloading, you're also able to do the encode of H.264 using these cards. What that means is that you're able to get better server scalability and better user experience. At the same time, because you don't need to plug in additional cards into the server, you're able to use the same slots to plug in additional graphics cards. That means the number of users you can support, even at high-end workstation type of environment, you're doubling the density on those. So here is an example. So we took an application, ArcGIS, and we ran some of the tests and we compared what you got between Blast Extreme, which was leveraging the H.264 encode capability, versus PC over IP. We were able to get better frames per second, which is very important, because when you get 13% better frame rate, that means the overall user experience is that much better. We were able to get much higher scalability while running these applications, because you're able to leverage the H.264 encoders, so you're freeing the CPU of some of the resources, and you're able to get better scalability, and you're able to add more users. We got lower latency. This is very important, especially if you're a WAN user. Think about latency as when a user clicks a mouse button, how quickly does he see something change? That's what latency is. And by having the least amount of latency, especially when you're in a WAN environment, it improves the user experience that much better, because you're able to quickly navigate and play around with applications. This is particularly important for 3D graphics use case. Think about ArcGIS, which is the mapping application. If you want to actually zoom in and zoom around and go around places and look at it, having the lowest latency makes it very, very important for us to be able to deliver the right user experience. Similarly, we have done a lot of work with Intel. So we recently, with our upcoming release, will support the Intel Skylake series of GPUs. So if any of you have in your server environment the Skylake GPUs, you can use that for delivering a good Blast Extreme experience. This is primarily around GPU offloading. We still don't support the H.264 encoding there. We do that with Nvidia, but we are able to fully utilize the graphics engine that's available on these Intel processors. We also have done that with AMD. With AMD, they have the multi-user GPU card. So per card, you can support between 2 to 15 users depending on the use case, and Blast Extreme is fully integrated with this card as well. Okay, so the next one is with regards to the client ecosystem, right? What matters at the end of the day is, yes, you have all the technology that's available to you, that's all running in the data center, but what does it mean in terms of delivering the right experience to the end user? What type of devices are there? You want to make sure that when it comes to management, especially around virtual machines, you have to manage your VMs in the data center, but you want to simplify what you're doing from an overall client perspective. That is very, very important, right? So for that, we have a whole lot of options, and we have done some awesome work in the last 2 quarters, which I'll walk through right now. But that should give you a lot of flexibility in terms of where you want to take and how you deploy VDI. How do you make sure that you have the right client that you pick, depending on the end user that you're selecting, and how do you go about it? So first, we support HTML access, Linux, Mac, Windows, different versions of Windows operating system. We support different mobile devices, whether it's iOS or Android, and we're also going to be supporting zero clients. So as part of the show, you'll see that, I think some of the announcements come out soon, but you can go onto the show floor. You will see smart zero clients that's designed for Blast Extreme. So a lot of our customers had said, we have Teradici zero clients, we like the experience, we like the simplicity of these devices. We have these options for Blast Extreme as well. The answer is yes. So we have come out with them, and it's going to be available. In fact, a lot of them are already certified and listed on our website, so you can go ahead and take a look at it. And I'll show you some at a later point and how it compares and contrasts with the Teradici zero client as well. What we are also doing is we are announcing tech preview of the Windows 10. So if any of your end users are actually using Windows 10 devices and they're going to the store and they want to download Horizon client, today we have the standard Windows client where IT administrators have to push them, but we are making this available on the store as well. So we're coming up with a tech preview of the Windows 10, and we will have that supported as part of Horizon 7 towards probably the second half of this year. But we also support things like continuum mode, right? So Microsoft is advertising quite a lot in terms of being able to use your phone, plugging it into a monitor and using that as a desktop. We will have that supported with Horizon 7. So a user can, if you're on a vacation and you want to quickly check email, all you need to carry is your phone, and you can just plug that into a monitor, and you'll have complete access to your desktop running in the cloud using that particular phone. So as we have different clients, the functionalities of these vary a lot, right? So some of them, generally when you look at Windows operating system, they tend to be the most feature rich. That means that every feature that we support, every use case that you can imagine generally can be supported with the Windows client. Now, as you move from a Windows client more to an HTML browser, we have more tailored it based on what the real use case is going to be. We don't expect people to be using an HTML browser to be working for 8 hours, 10 hours a day. That is more for a quick access where either a user is going to some other office, he's using a guest computer, and he wants to quickly access his desktop running in the cloud, and that's where HTML access comes in. But if you're on the rich clients, that means you're a corporate user, you're in a LAN environment, you have a Windows-based thin client, you want the complete user experience that you would traditionally get with the PC. So that's the extreme end. Generally, what you will see is that with Windows, Linux, Mac, you have the complete feature set supported, so you can pick and choose whichever you want just based on the performance. Some companies I'm a Windows store, so I only want Windows devices in my office. Some of them are like, I don't want Windows, it has to be Linux, and some of them use Mac OS. So we support all those three completely. And when it comes to mobile devices like iOS and Android, there are certain things that is not needed, right? You don't plug in a USB printer to a tablet, right? So depending on what the use case is, we have gone ahead and supported the right feature set on these devices. But nonetheless, we have the full range of endpoints that's available that you can pick and choose from when it comes to actually managing the end users. So in terms of comparison of PC or IP zero clients to what you can expect from some of the smart zero clients that's going to be released, and some of them are already released, more to come, you can expect more of the feature completeness. With PC or IP zero clients, we couldn't do certain things like flash redirection or multimedia redirection because the endpoint hardware was simply not capable of doing those kind of things. But with the Blast Zero clients that you will see, these are going to be full-featured zero clients which will give you all the flexibility and the manageability of a zero client. But at the same time, from an end user perspective, there's going to be no compromise in terms of what they will experience and what features you can deliver to these users. So previously, you had to make that decision, understanding what the user is, what they would be doing, whether to go and decide in terms of buying a PC or IP0 client or a flexible thin client for PC or IP protocol. You no longer have to make that decision. So it's pretty simple. So in the last 6 months, when we launched in March, we did not have any thin or zero clients certified for Blast Extreme. So in the last 2 quarters, we've spent a lot of time with our partners, and I'm happy to say that we have over 70 devices that are already certified for Blast Extreme. You can go to VMware's website. We have a compatibility guide where you can actually take a look at all the clients, and some of the information I've given you here should help you decide which client is the right one for you. You can pick and choose what's important for you and for your users and buy the selected client. In many cases, if you're already having a regular thin client, you should simply be able to upgrade from the previous version of Horizon. If you were using Horizon 3.x client, X being 0.5, 0.6, whatever it was, you can just be able to upgrade that to Horizon Client 4, and you should be able to get the Blast Extreme experience, right? So you can leverage your existing hardware and then still get the Blast experience as long as you have the right hardware platform. The only exception to that is the Teradici zero clients. Unfortunately, because that was a dedicated zero client built for PC or IP, it does not support Blast Extreme protocol. So that will be the only area where you may want to continue to use Blast PC or IP. But if you're using a thin client, a PC, or any of these devices, you can just upgrade to the latest version of Horizon clients, and you can actually try out the Blast Extreme protocol. Okay. So we have several clients. If you go by the Dell booth, they have the 3000, 5000, and 7000 series. They're all certified for Blast Extreme. Many of them are being demoed in the Dell booth. Similarly, we have from HP, they have a whole range of thin and zero clients certified. HP is actually amongst the first to certify Smart Zero client with Blast Extreme protocol. So you should be able to take a look at it at their booth as well. So one other feedback that we got from customers was, it's great that we are able to use these mobile devices, but when it comes to tablets, which is most of the enterprise customers tend to use iOS tablets within enterprises, they wanted a full mouse support. We support the Apple Pencil, right? That is convenient if you're doing. I see many of you using the Apple Pencil. and you can get the Apple Pencil experience even with Horizon, so that is fully supported. But we also went ahead and worked with a company called SwiftPoint where we support a mouse. So you can pretty much now just carry your Apple iPad, go everywhere, and be able to get the complete PC experience using the Apple tablets. And that includes the keyboard, which comes from Apple, or you also have the mouse support now. So that delivers a complete rich Windows experience on an Apple tablet. SwiftPoint is also giving off $50 as part of this trade show. So if any of you want to go and buy just to quickly try it in your environment, you can go ahead and buy it at this expo. But we're also working with them to make sure we get you right codes and everything so that you can get it at the discounted rate. But nonetheless, it's good to see that whether it's a tablet or whether it's a PC or independent of the device, you have the full ecosystem now supported, and you can get that rich Windows experience that you desire even on non-Windows devices. Okay, so with that, I'll hand it off to Sean. Sean is going to talk about some of the technical details. Thank you, Sean.
Hey, everyone. So I'm proud to have been part of the BLAST project for the last few years, and excited to represent a lot of great work by a lot of great teams to get us here. So BLAST Extreme in Horizon 7 is now a Tier 1 protocol. So we support, as Kieran mentioned, all the use cases that you'll use Horizon for, VDI, RDSH apps, etc. So Horizon 7 new pools will actually default to BLAST as the protocol. It's also selectable in all the different places you can configure your pools. So you can make it the default protocol, but that doesn't mean you can change how users, whether they can select the protocol. But let's say you select BLAST as your default protocol, but you have a Teradata 0 client. We will still default to whichever protocol is available at the time. So just because you make BLAST the default protocol, that doesn't mean it's the only protocol for the pool. So we will work if you make PCOIP the default and connect with the HTML access client, still be able to connect. We'll make the correct decision behind the scenes. But this just allows you to configure and decide, which protocol your users will most likely use. We've also added in the client UI support to do some configuration for the user side. They can enable or disable H.264 UDP depending on what that user might be trying to do. So hopefully these screenshots don't look too foreign to you, but these are all the different ways that you wind up configuring protocols in Horizon. So what happens when you get a BLAST connection? So the client will issue a request to the Horizon infrastructure. The connection server will receive that request, forward it to the BLAST server, which is the service running on the remote desktop. When we see that there's a incoming session, we'll generate a token, give it back to the Horizon agent. Horizon agent forwards it all the way back through. The client receives it. Client opens the WebSocket connection with that token, and we start the session. And that's the case with all of our clients, all of our backends. So once the session is begun, that's when we start to multiplex over that WebSocket. So virtual channels are the way for us to be able to do video, audio, as well as all of the various features you may want to access while you're using your BLAST session. So what you see up there is a breakdown of what the architecture of our virtual channels look like. You can see that whatever piece is active at the time, audio, video, whatever feature you're using, feeds through that VVC, the View Virtual Channel architecture, and gets multiplexed onto that one connection and sent over. There are some exceptions. You can see on the left side, things like MMR run over their own side channel, but we're constantly working to consolidate. Keep your eyes out in the future. We're trying to make sure that we can get things down to one connection, or if you want to optimize, allow the sideband channels. So one of the reasons why we're trying to consolidate is we're trying to make sure that as few firewall ports are required to get BLAST up and running. As you can see, there's really only two that you need available that are mandatory to have the BLAST connection. Port 443 on the outer firewall is all you need if you're going to use TCP. 8443 for UDP access you'll need to open up. Internally, 22443 is what we use for our internal traffic unless configured otherwise. And then, as I was mentioning, if you want to use MMR or USB currently, you'll need to open up those side channels. As Kieran pointed out, the slides will be available. I know that's a kind of a tiny picture to be able to see from there. So this is more of a breakdown. So what I was mentioning was what Blast used. This is more of the entire picture for the Horizon suite, all the various protocols and ports that we use during a connection. So I won't go diving down into these, but this gives you the complete picture. So from the beginning, one of the things we tried to focus on when developing Blast is configurability. We wanted to be able to tweak and adjust according to different conditions, different environments, different use cases. We try to do that as much as possible dynamically, but we also try to expose ways to allow configuration dependent upon certain scenarios. We do that through mostly GPOs, but we also support UEM. And so this gives you different ways to customize based on your user's environment. So this first table are sort of the key knobs that we expose. Max and min bandwidth, obviously that's the window that Blast will see as far as calculating available bandwidth. So we will do our best to try to determine network conditions. Changing the max and min bandwidth just gives us more of an idea of exactly where we should be looking for the current bandwidth settings. We will try to go as far as we can to deliver the best experience. And so if you drop the max session bandwidth down, it just kind of puts a cap on to make sure we'll behave, I guess, in scenarios where we have lots of open bandwidth. The max frame per second is also configurable. We target 30. But you can raise or lower that depending on use case. And screen blanking is there for troubleshooting. Typically when you connect with a VDI session, we will blank the Vsphere console. But if the admin sets screen blanking to be off, then we will actually expose that so that you can see what the user's doing. So these are more of our quality settings, so different ways to tweak the protocol according to your needs. At the top, image quality, that's also the window. It's how far down we will drop our quality when things are busy, how far we will build up when things get quiet. The HTTP service is, I mentioned port 22443 when we were looking at the firewall. So that's how you can configure if you want to use a different internal port for the server to listen on. You can also turn UDP on or off depending on your use case. Similarly, you can turn off H.264. So if your scenario calls for higher lossless quality, then you may want to disable H.264. And that is also available. Similarly, if you want to not use any bandwidth for audio, you can just turn audio off, and we won't forward any of the audio traffic. You can configure clipboard settings to allow bidirectional, one-way only, or completely disabled, and then also change that H.264 quality window, similar to what I was saying for JPEG PNG. So when trying to troubleshoot, we expose performance counters. These 4 counters are exposed under the VMware Blast category. You can see we expose our estimated bandwidth, RTT, frames per second, and throughput. So the bandwidth, like I was mentioning earlier, that's what we've calculated as the available bandwidth. And then throughput is how much of that we're using to deliver whatever's happening on the desktop. And then the RTT is the client to server round trip time that we've calculated. And the frames per second is how many frames we've actually encoded over the last second and sent to the client. So a lot of that information is dumped into the logs by the encoder. So if you look at the Blast logs, you'll see this information presented there. As I mentioned, we'll dump the RTT, bandwidth, throughput, frames per second. We'll also dump FB change, which represents how frequently the desktop actually changed. So a low frames per second number may not be a problem if the user's desktop is idle. Similarly, active schedule and poll represents how often we've been active over that period of time, and the max frame per second was our target. So none of these values in their own represent a way to determine if something was good or bad, but this will give you kind of a holistic view of what was happening on the desktop at a certain time. So based on a lot of our testing, this is our recommendation for Blast Extreme optimization. So H.264 in most of our tests has always come out as the winner. It's most bandwidth efficient and able to deliver a high quality experience for users. TCP also has proven itself to work well in many of the cases we've tried. You can set min or max bandwidth, as I said earlier, if you have a low bandwidth scenario. Setting that window will help the protocol cope better as opposed to trying to estimate. And then avoid using client drive redirection. So forwarding large folders will eat up a lot of that available bandwidth, and so will hurt your call experience. And don't adjust the frame rate. As I said, we do our best while we're running to dynamically change. So we will target the best frame rate according to the scenario. And we spoke earlier about feature parity. So this was one of the big areas we wanted to make sure BLAST was enterprise secure. So we support IPv6, we're FIPS ready, TCP connections are encrypted, we support TLS 1.1 and AES encryption. So, and that will finish my section, and we can take for the first question.
You can come to the mic, it's easier, that way everybody can hear it.
Yeah, and the recording will pick up the question.
VDI environments. I'm sure if there's a new version of BLAST coming out, or
which slide was it?
it was slide 8, I believe.
Go ahead and ask your question. We'll get.
I'm just wondering when USB pass-through and smart cards will be available for the Linux VDI experience.
Okay, so what we are doing is continuously enhancing our overall experience. So Windows is generally ahead of it. So as part of So as I said, for Linux VDI, primarily what we've been targeting so far is in terms of developers and those, but we are enhancing some of those. So what you talked about is already in our plan, and we are working on some of those things. If
so
it's not
all
support.
These features right now are for basically Windows.
This is primarily for Windows. That's right. But there may be a subset of
Linux,
we try to keep it feature parity across everything, right? We do support all the different desktops. We try to keep it on feature parity, but there are areas where we're still continuing to enhance, because Linux VDI itself is fairly new. It's about 6 months new, and we're continuously adding feature set towards it. So we have that in our futures to go get done. Definitely we'll take care of it.
Thank you. Talk about the Zero clients too.
Please do. Yeah. You had a question on Zero clients? Huh? Oh, you're excited about this. You should go check out in the HP booth and take a look at the demo. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hey, I was wondering, the JPEG user experience with Blast Extreme how does that compare to the H.264 user experience from a frames per second? Like if you were streaming, like let's say a compressed video file over that connection between the server and the client.
So generally, when you look at JPEG, you would pick JPEG when you want that lossless image quality. What that means is, in order for you to be able to deliver that lossless image quality, from a CPU perspective, from a server perspective, when you're trying to do the encoding, again, it depends on the different conditions you have. For example, if you're just doing a soft encode, that means that JPEG actually does better in terms of CPU consumption as a soft encode. But we envision that more and more users, IT administrators, are going to start using the grid cards, because it's getting lower and lower in price, so you get that opportunity there. But in general, when it comes to server encoding, JPEG takes less than H.264. That's number one.
Okay, so you say to use it in a lossless scenario. When you say lossless, what color bit depth does that particular JPEG encoding within the BLAST protocol support? Color bit depth, 8-bit or 10-bit? If it's lossless.
So I think we have all of our color depth is 24-bit. That's what we support.
So
we don't support 16
channel.
or 8 or any of those. But we do have different JPEG quality levels. We have the high, medium, low, which you can set within JPEG. And depending on what you need, you can set the appropriate quality levels. That's already built into it. That's number one. We are taking a look at if there is a need to set different color depths. For example, 16-bit color depth. But if you look at what even Windows is doing or Microsoft is doing, they're going away with all those different color depths and making it a standard. So
I was speaking specifically about higher color, like 30-bit, right? So if we're doing graphic encoding or graphic work with like gradients and things like that, where we really want to see that.
So we really encourage for the high-end, the 3D graphics type of workload to use the H.264 protocol, because that's when you get the best end-to-end. right? But for those use cases where you're looking at imaging and those kind of use cases for doctors, that's where we recommended JPEG, and which is completely lossless.
Okay. And I saw our last one. With
Sure.
HEVC hardware encoding coming out in like Pascal generations and moving forward, do you envision that BLAST will kind of evolve to support 10-bit workflows? I say 10-bit per channel,
10-bit
so like
color
30-bit.
Yeah, 10-bit component and those.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, those are all things which we are considering, but today when you look at it, we also look at what some of the client ecosystem is, which is capable of delivering that kind of color quality. So as the technology on the client side evolves, as the technology from a server capability evolves, we'll bring the software capabilities also in there. So definitely things which H.264 is still by far the most widely used format today. So we're using that, but as the other technologies evolve, H.265 and HVC, they all come up, we will be looking into some of those technologies in the future. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So for Intel GPU virtualization, is that strictly restricted to the Skylake platform? So we'll have to wait until next year when the high-end Xeons based on Skylake comes out?
We already had announced for the Xeon, I believe, Broadwell and Caswell. That was already supported. We added support for the Skylake GPU series as part of the upcoming release.
Okay.
So we do have a broad...
Already for Broadwell?
Yeah, out of the box, when we did Horizon 7, we came out with some of the Intel platform support. We just added the Skylake GPU to this on upcoming release.
Okay. And do
So
you get any
we do
other...
have a list of server which we have documented what we support. So please take a look at that. And Intel can also answer what we support. We work with them very closely. They'll also be able to guide you in that direction. Both ways we can do it. We can support you on that.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. The only area where we haven't fully leveraged and something that we are looking into is around the H.264 encoding capability from Intel. We don't do the H.264 encode. We just do the GPU offload today. We do the GPU offload today.
I've noticed when you allow the users to select their protocol, it also adds the option of RDP in there. Is there any way to restrict the pool to only allow PC over IP and BLAST without RDP? So right now, yes, user can choose protocol, but then they can choose between all three since it's a drop-down. And I figured out how to do it by editing the Atom database in the background, but it's, it resets every time you hit OK.
We'll take a look at that.
Okay.
You should be, I understand where you're going.
Yeah.
You want to make sure you're just restricting the users to what they have available.
Yeah, because we want
We can
PC over IP
take a
to
look
be
at
the default, and then...
Yeah. Got it. Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll take a look at
like
that.
I was saying earlier, by setting PCIP as the default if you have web clients or if a user wants to select BLAST, but the only real way to do it would be to check that box that says don't allow users to select, but then that would work, you'd get BLAST for like the web client, but yeah, they wouldn't be able to select themselves.
Okay, printer redirection. First of all, serial and parallel printers, just right below that, is that apply to printers on printer redirection where it says yes on BLAST? Okay, and then this is 0, so, and maybe I've missed this, but PC over IP or BLAST non-zero,
That's
PC
correct.
over IP is still just USB redirection, right?
Correct.
Okay, but you can
So
do
the
serial
way-
and parallel with a BLAST client, a non-zero client.
The way to read these slides is, with the Teradici Zero client, you were extremely limited in terms of what you could do because it had a very small firmware, non-commercial firmware. But with the BLAST-based Zero clients, they're going to be more based on commercial, like stripped-down versions of Linux or customized versions of Linux, which gives you a lot more flexibility from a driver perspective that allows you to bring in these kind of features and allow you to get the complete remote experience features, even with Zero clients. You could not do that with the Teradici-based Zero clients in the past.
But with a non-zero BLAST client, you can
that's
still...
true. That's right.
Okay.
You can pick a flexible thin client, for example. You don't call that Zero client. You pick a flexible thin client and you get the full experience. But with the BLAST Extreme Zero client, because they're going to be more based on Linux or stripped down Linux-based operating systems, you will have the flexibility where the full feature set can be supported, but you still get the benefits of a Zero client where it's locked down to a single protocol. You don't have the complete flexibility. You don't necessarily have to have a browser in there, which is all a security loophole.
So
All those things are there too.
I've not used BLAST, so a traditional Horizon View client install on a Windows, or maybe a thin client embedded. I mean, it's the Horizon View client. It's just
Correct.
you just have it use a different protocol.
Correct.
Okay.
So if you're using Windows, when you install Horizon View Client 4.2, which is the upcoming one, you will have access to all the full flexibility in terms of what remote access we support. In addition to that, you can, as long as the backend is configured correctly, on the client side, you can pick and choose, say, which protocol you want to connect. You have all those flexible options there.
And when you're saying printer redirection, you're not saying thin print, because with what we're doing, thin print really doesn't work. We're communicating with an iSeries, an IBM iSeries, and it uses old school telnet printing, and that's why I'm getting at this redirection.
We do support thin print as part of
right.
our
I just
automated
want
experience.
to make sure that's
applicable in
not
your
what
use
that's
case.
talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
all right.
what would be great is if you guys can reach out through your salespeople and send us a note in terms of what you're looking at. We can definitely consider that as part of our roadmap going in the future. We're happy to facilitate that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
The metrics that you guys collect for the blast this session, will that be made available through, where will that data be accessible from?
So the session, the information we collect, that's within your environment.
Right.
You want to know where that is stored within your environment?
Right. If I
Or
wanted
the
to
log
go-
files. You want to know more about where the log files are?
Yes.
Okay. Want to talk about that?
Or-
You're
or
talking
is
about the
that gonna be-
serialized.
I'm just curious if that's going to be exposed through the other tools. I probably VROps or VR.
VROPS.
VROPS
we
is
support.
one of them. There are many other tools people use, like Lakeside software and all this stuff, so we work with them very closely.
Okay.
But we do have the framework where you can enable and track a lot of the different statistics. VRealize is one of the monitoring tools which takes advantage of that information and provides it to the user. But I'm sure a lot of the third-party users, if you go by the expo floor, they also have that supported, and they can provide that information to you in a way that's more suitable for you.
Right.
So depending on the tools you're using, talk to your vendors, and we have all the information available that they can plug in and get the information from Blast Extreme as well.
Yeah, like I mentioned, we have the performance counters that we expose. You can use those, but I would recommend. I was actually just at the expo before this, and I was looking at the VMware booth where they had it all set up, and they've got. He was walking through all the VROPS integration, so you can ask him; he'll show you how it all shows up there.
Thank you.
What about monitoring the GPU frame rate? Because you want to compare frame rate between the actual session frame rate and what the GPU.
You should be able to get that as part of the logs.
Part of the logs.
Yeah. And we are working to integrate that with the rest of the tools so that you can even monitor the GPU performance.
Like the Windows performance.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, if you're
That's
interested
one
in
of
if you're interested in the frame rate, you'll be able to get that. But if you want to know GPU load, I don't remember if that shows up in VROPS or not.
And so we are. So we are trying to expose a lot more monitoring in terms of the graphics cards and the capabilities of the graphics, especially when you're using some of the Nvidia and those graphics cards in there. So that's all part of the future, and we will make sure that we're able to monitor that so that it's one-stop monitoring of what happens from a user perspective, what's happening on the GPU perspective as well. Please.
When the Blast connection is established, you said it contacts the Blast server on the VM. Is that specifically on something running on the OS? Or, okay.
Yeah, it's just a service running on the whatever VM instance.
So you'll have to load that on each OS prior to...
When you install the Horizon agent, it automatically gets installed.
Okay.
So it's not a separate piece.
Okay.
It's just a separate executable running, and the Horizon agent talks to it.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. We really appreciate you having you here. Thank you.